Hello and welcome to Aspects of History. I'm Oliver Webb Carter and I'm the editor. If you're new to Aspects of History, we're a magazine and website dedicated to history and historical fiction. Head over to aspectsofhistory.com where you'll find articles, interviews, book reviews and short stories, and they're all absolutely free. Our magazine is at the insanely cheap price of under a tenner for a year's subscription, and that's under a tenner in American as well. Anyway, on to the podcast. If you enjoy it, please give it a great rating. It'll help us carry on running them. Hello and welcome to part 2 of our interview with Professor Norman Davies, the author of George II. I do recommend you listen to part 1 if you haven't already. Today, Norman continues to tolerate me much as he would tolerate a particularly dim student, as he explains the British monarchy in its European and pluralistic context. And of course we discuss the topic of slavery and George Augustus's connection to it. I do hope you enjoy the episode, and please do subscribe. So another thing I think that he's been described as, George Augustus, is the king of slavery.
Oh, where did you hear that?
That was just in some research that our reviewer had obtained.
Well, I think that came from me. It's, of course, a bit of an exaggeration. I proposed that title for a piece which the Penguin publicity people sort of swallowed, I think. But I think it was put out, and so I'm glad that it's come round. But I chose that sensationalist title because his connection to slavery has been completely ignored. Nobody has written a sentence about it. The latest biography of George II, published in 2010 by a man in Cambridge called Andrew Thompson, which is to be commended in many ways. He makes a very good effort at righting the wrongs, the sort of overturning the vilification that had come our monarch's way. But he doesn't say a word about the slave trade, although during this reign, 1733 to 1760, the British slave trade became, leader in the field in the same way as the Royal Navy did. I've got, 2 or 3 pages about it, but it is amazing that because this king has been largely erased from history, like he's not even in 1066 and all that. He's been rubbed out because he's not present. Nobody has connected the ruling monarch with the rise of the slave trade, which is an interesting topic.
And what was his relationship with it?
Well, he was governor of the South Sea Company, which was at the heart of the slave trade. It all came from the Treaty of Utrecht, when Britain secured this monopoly on the the asiento, on the trade with Spanish colonies, an important part of which was a trade in slaves from Africa to the Caribbean and South America. And the company created for that was the South Sea Company, which was the object of this mad speculation. How many people talking about the South Sea bubble tell you it's all about slavery? That was where the money was coming from.
It's interesting. Yes, we had a piece, an interview with Thomas Levison, who's written a book on the South Sea bubble. But it's interesting because obviously the bubble is the thing that really attracts the attention. But as you say,
yeah, well, after the bubble, the South Sea Company continued. My man stops being the governor just before the bubble. He's governor as Prince of Wales from when he comes to 1718. Then his father, George I, takes over as governor of the South Sea Company. And then when George II succeeds in 1727, he takes back the governorship of the South Sea Company and holds it to the end of his reign. He also founds the Royal African Company. There's a reorganization of the African trade during his reign anyhow, and a new company is founded, and he provides the charter for that. No, there's a big story to be told. George II founds the colony of Georgia in America, named after him, of course. And Georgia was going to be a slave-free state. It was founded at the initiative of an idealist philanthropist called James Oglethorpe, who intended to rehabilitate it, rehabilitate, convicts and felons and the poor of London. Once it was established in 1732, and after about 10 years, the planters there decided they couldn't compete with other colonies because slave labor was more profitable. So slavery was brought into Georgia with the approval, of course, of our man. But again, the interesting thing to me is not all that. That's the British side of it. George Augustus was the biggest serf master in the electorate. Serfdom existed in Germany until the early 19th century. And George Augustus was brought up accepting serfdom, which was pretty horrible. The difference between serfdom and slavery is a topic for experts. But the serfs were tied to the land, they were beaten up, they could be killed by their owners with impunity. They were entirely dependent on their masters. The one thing that couldn't happen to a serf, they couldn't be sold off individually like slaves. They were sold off together with the estate, but that was no joy for the serf. How many of the people going on about slavery now ever compare it to serfdom? It's a very sort of insular way of looking at it.
Well, serfdom was widespread all across what was then it was not Germany, but all the various states.
Well, in France as well. The Ancien Regime, France, Germany, Poland, Russia. Slavery was still going in Russia, as well as serfdom.
So another thing he had to deal with in England, but and speaking to you, I'm interested to know if he had to deal with something similar. Was the 45 with Bonnie Prince Charlie and reaching as far south as Derby? Did he have any? I mean, I'm interested to know how much that affected him, but also did he have to deal with any incursions into his own territory in Germany?
Yes, interesting you say England. Do you know where Bonnie Prince Charlie landed?
In Scotland?
Yeah. That's
which
not England.
Was part of the Active Union and of course, Great Britain.
Yeah. No, but this is why language is important. Yes. Most English historians don't know the difference between England and Scotland or Great Britain. And it's very important. Okay, he was King of Great Britain, and in Great Britain, his title was opposed by the Stuarts, the Pretenders, and there were two big Stuart Jacobite risings, 1715, 1745. He dealt with that pretty effectively. In 1745, he actually set up a camp in Finchley outside London in case the Jacobites got as far as London, which they didn't. And his son Cumberland, who was a pretty awful character, of course, took the army north and basically destroyed Gaelic civilization. But in Germany, the threat was not from sort of local claimants, it was from France. Hanover is no, to the west of Germany. And the French were the hereditary threat, the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. And the French were constantly trying to cross the Rhine and invade the Holy Roman Empire. The only time during his reign when they actually captured Hanover was in 1757 in the 7 Years' War, which was for him, a major threat. Fortunately, he won over William Pitt, the elder, who had spent most of the 20 previous years denouncing what he called, what did he call it? The terrible electorate. Pitt realized that he had to fight the French both on land on the continent and on sea, and Britain was pretty successful. Well, very successful. That's the time when we got India, when they captured Canada.
Indeed, the Annus Mirabilis.
Yeah.
George II Augustus is not the first monarch to have dual sovereignty. There's Henry II, for example, with the Angevin Empire, and they were all, and of course his son John and Richard the Lionheart. These kings were always accused of caring more for their ancestral homelands than they did for England. Was that was that an accusation that?
Well, it's a bit of a joke to my mind. I say to have multiple crowns was the norm. The Stuarts throughout the 17th century were kings of Scotland, kings of England, and kings of Ireland. There were 3 countries joined. This was a composite state, right? 1 sovereign, 3 crowns. So, what was their homeland? Well, the Stuarts were Scottish. England was not the home of the Stuarts. You mentioned these distant medieval monarchs. The predecessor of the Hanoverians to have dual sovereignty was William of Orange. He continued to be stadtholder of Holland whilst being king of England in his case, jointly with Mary. In the Netherlands, he appointed a manager. I forget the Dutch title, but nonetheless, he was still the sovereign ruler of England and Scotland and Ireland and the Netherlands. This is another composite state.
And where does he stack up as an elector? Is he in the Premier League of electors?
Well, as you know, there were 365 states of the Holy Roman Empire. He was one of the, by his time, how many were there? 6 secular electors, absolutely the top, the premiership of Germany. He wielded his vote in the elections for the Holy Roman Empire, and he was one who voted against the Habsburgs in 1742 or 1740, and then of course the Habsburgs came back after an interval. But sure, no, he certainly Premier Division. He was active in the League of Princes of the Holy Roman Empire, who were divided between Catholics and Protestants. And the Protestant League was something he was very concerned about, because his neighbor, the Elector of Saxony, who incidentally had become King of Poland recently, so you've got another composite state, Saxony, Poland, but the Elector of Saxony turned Catholic in order to become King of Poland, but wanted and succeeded in remaining the president of the of the Protestant princes of Germany. And our man was unhappy about that, as a lot of German Protestants were. If you turn Catholic, you should join the Catholic League of Princes. So that was quite an incident. Incidentally, religion is very interesting. All Lutheran princes in Germany, not the Catholics, but all Lutheran princes were, they had the title of Episcopus Supremus, the supreme bishop, of the head of the Lutheran Church in their state. George Augustus was the supreme head of the Lutheran state in the electorate of Brunswick-Lüneburg. He then became supreme head of the Church of England. So he had two. He was supreme head of both of them, right? But whoever tells you that?
Well, I think you have now finally. It seems.
Well, it's pretty important, isn't it? If the head of the Church of England is not an Anglican,
absolutely,
he's not only not an Anglican, he's the head of another church.
But such was the desperation to have a non-Catholic on the throne.
Yeah, well, it was desperate and very badly informed. They didn't even know who they were inviting to be monarchs. Lucy Worsley, for example, talks about Hanover being a dinky little principality.
But you just described how large it was, and
important, and the implications of inviting a person like that to be the British monarch. The implications were huge, and they only found out about it, I think, afterwards. And it's probably the last theme. You see, the British history has been written. The Whig interpretation of history was that there was a revolution in 1688, in the Glorious Revolution, and from that date onwards, the Parliament was the most important institution, laid down the laws which the monarchy had to follow. Well, the Hanoverians, as you call them, didn't follow that. And Walpole didn't. Like Walpole, with George II, took complete control of Parliament through corruption, bribery, placement, and everything that Namier describes. And it was only after George II that Parliament, as it were, reasserts itself and moves towards the constitutional arrangement of the 19th century, which everybody, as it were, took to have been built in stone since 1688, and it wasn't. So I think our man has got an important place in the history of Parliament.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a fascinating book. We've got it reviewed. It's on our website. So I did George II for my A-levels, though. And it was so English-centric. I mean, we were aware that he was an elector of Hanover, obviously, but there was, even in our two modules of the A-level of European and English modern history, we only looked at George II and George I from an English standpoint or British standpoint.
Mm. Well, that's how it is. That's how it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh well, I don't usually read reviews, but
well, I'll send it over to you. And I just wanted to thank you, because I know having an hour to talk me. I know you mentioned how busy you are. Are you working on something else at the moment?
Yeah, I'm writing a history of Galicia. Austro-Hungarian Galicia, which is now partly in Poland and partly in Ukraine, completely vanished kingdoms, which were
Indeed.
one of my ideas. Yeah, but absolutely fascinating. Similar problems. I probably got it from studying Polish history, how how peculiar sort of national versions of history are, how they distort. And English history in particular is very nationalistic.
I suppose we're all looking back at the past from our from the country as it is today. I guess assuming that it was like
country as we think it is today. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. I mean, you wouldn't believe it from my accent, but I've got a lot of Irish in me, so
Right.
I certainly appreciate the English-centric view of history. It is very frustrating.
Well, I've got a lot of followers in Ireland. In fact, I gave a lecture, was it last week, to the city of Armagh, which was fascinating. It's not. I don't know a lot of the details, but just a matter of being aware of how biased historical narratives can be, and the language of if you don't get the language straight, you can't think straight about it.
Well, I mean, that's probably, you've got that impression from some of our questions, because they come from, certainly on my side, from being educated in an English school by an English teacher.
That's what history should be. It's about showing how the past was different from the present. As you say, a lot of people start with these fixed ideas about the world as they would like it to be, and then project it into the past.
Well, Norman, I think that's a great way to end it. Thank you very much for your time, and I've certainly learned a lot.
Good. All the best.
So much.
Thank you.
Well, there you are. Hopefully you can now confidently discuss the Hanoverians, or, as we should call them, the Brunswick-Lüneburgs. Coming soon, we have Tessa Dunlop discussing her new book, Army Girls, The Secrets and Stories of Military Service from the Final Few Women Who Fought in World War II. Now, this is an important subject, and Tessa has done fantastic work in ensuring women who served during the war are given a voice. We also have Anne O'Brien talking about her new novel, The Royal Game, a story of romance, bloody violence, and the Wars of the Roses. So do subscribe and give us a great rating if you can. Thank you, and good night.